Law, which is part of Clifford Chance. There's a technical reason for all of that, right? Who will be welcoming us. So please put together. Janice, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much for helping me spend the evening with us. So my name is Janice Goh, a partner at Clifford Chance Asia, specializing in commercial dispute resolution with a particular focus on white-collar crime and financial services regulatory matters. I'm really delighted to welcome you to our event, The State of Generative AI in the APAC Legal Ecosystem. As a firm deeply committed to leveraging technology to enhance legal services, Clifford Chance is honored to co-host this event with the Asia Pacific Legal Innovation and Technology Association. So, generative AI offers an unprecedented opportunity to advance innovation in the legal profession. By automating routine work, Gen AI allows lawyers to focus on higher value work, such as providing strategic counsel advice, building strong client relationships, and demonstrating a deep understanding of clients' complex needs. Clifford Chance has moved beyond a theoretical understanding of Gen AI to actively implement and pilot practical applications within our firm. We are heavily investing in our suite of AI tools to ensure that we are in the best possible position to bring benefits and efficiencies to our business and how we provide services to our clients. So, for example, Clifford Chance is one of the first organizations globally to deploy both Copilot for Microsoft 365 at scale. All our employees have access to Copilot and our own private and secure AI tool, which we call Clifford Chance Assist, developed on Microsoft's Azure OpenAI platform. So the use of these solutions are within our global principles and policy framework that enables responsible AI adoption and ensure that client consent is, of course, obtained where appropriate when these solutions are deployed for client work outside the firm's own business operations. So at Clifford Chance, we have been actively exploring the potential of Gen AI within my practice area, which is litigation and dispute resolution. So our initiatives include establishing the Asia Pacific Litigation and Dispute Resolution Steering Committee, which focuses on enhancing the adoption and utilization of AI tools across the region. We also implement comprehensive AI training programs to equip our legal professionals with the necessary skills to effectively use these tools. We focus on improving efficiencies by piloting and prioritizing AI tools to determine their most effective applications within our practice. And one of our success stories is our Gen AI-powered enforcement tracker, something that's very close to my heart, that transforms the way press releases for the Hong Kong Competition Commission is scraped and summarized. So my colleague Shanice will share more on this initiative later. By focusing on these areas, we aim to safely and effectively integrate Gen AI into our litigation and dispute resolution practice in the APAC region, ultimately enhancing our service delivery and client outcomes. So today, we are very excited to convene this panel of experts to discuss the current state of Gen AI adoption in the APAC region. We'll explore the challenges and opportunities, share best practices, and discuss the future of AI in the legal industry. I believe that by fostering collaboration and innovation, we can unlock the full potential of Gen AI and create a more efficient, effective, and accessible legal system for all. Thank you very much again for joining us today, and I look forward to a stimulating and informative discussion. At this point, I would like to invite my colleague Shanice to kick off.
Hi, everyone. So echoing Janice, thank you so much for joining us this evening. It's the very start of a very, very busy week, I imagine. So I think I'll be seeing a lot more familiar faces over the next couple of days. But, just to move on very quickly to our sharing. So I wanted to provide a bit more color because we always talk about Gen AI in terms of practice, more of a large macro kind of principles view. But I thought we would provide a little more detail on what we're actually doing with them. So as Janice mentioned, we have developed our very own AI tool, which is called Clipper Chance Assist. That's built on Microsoft's Azure OpenAI platform. And our partnership with Microsoft, combined with our in-house expertise and development capabilities, enabled us to create tailored features that meet the specific needs of lawyers. So without giving away too much, for example, our CC Assist has one-click features like legal text summarization and document review. So it's literally a button that lawyers can access very easily. And by focusing on legal use cases, we've ensured that CC Assist understands nuances of language. So one of the use cases that Janice very briefly raised is the generative AI, AI-powered enforcement tracker that controls the way press releases are scripted and summarized from the HKCC, the Hong Kong Competition Commission. And very thankfully, we're very grateful that this initiative was recognized at the APAC FT Innovative Lawyers Awards earlier this year, where it won the award for innovation in digital tools. So just to provide a bit more context on the current process, which I'm sure, for those of you that do trackings of enforcement actions, it's very manual, it's very tedious. Some of these manual tasks include instructing trainees on how to complete the tracker, best practices and guidances in terms of populating this. Trainees and junior associates have to go in and update the tracker. And then slightly more senior members, like, associates or senior associates, have to analyze the input data and present these market trends to clients, and as well as review them for QC and quality checks. So what we set out to do is we really wanted to automate this very manual, very grunt work part of the process. So the team developed an end-to-end solution comprising two main technologies. The first one is basically called RPA, which is robotic process automation. It's a very fancy word for automating workflow automation. So this bot would identify when new and relevant press releases are posted on the HKCC website, and then it facilitates the data extraction process by entering the exact press release information into our CC Assist. So then we go on to the second part of the technology, which is our CC Assist bot, which then generates a very concise summary of a press release according to a fixed template. And I'm sure most of you here know that this standardized summary output was only achieved after very many and several iterations of engineering. So after that, we decided, how can we take this a step further and make it really easy to read, like really digestible? So we incorporated data analytics with this dashboard that includes, visualizations and charts to offer lawyers a real-time and dynamic overview of all ongoing enforcement actions. So this really helps from a client perspective. So I think all of you are asking, what's the impact? Now, without giving away the specific numbers or the specific costs and time savings, of course, it's a lot of time savings on non-billable but essential work. And I think more importantly, it goes to show the scalability and the potential of Gen AI solution. Because in the near term, we're working on scaling the solution to other sites that are frequented by the Hong Kong litigation team. And in the future, this solution can be really configured to track enforcement actions across various regulatory bodies, jurisdictions, and practice areas, so GFM, for example. Now, this is just one example of how we are exploring the potential of generative AI here at our firm, Clipperchance, and we're excited to continue testing the limits of this technology as it evolves and identify new ways to enhance our legal services. So without further ado, I'll pass it back to Brian, who will be presenting more on Alita.
Thanks so very much for that, Steve. I don't know whether I might just sit down over there, so I feel like I'm amongst everybody here. So if I can, we'll see. Slide. Thank you very much. So I just wanted. So some of you, I was asked early on. So are you an Alita NIDA? And some of you are not quite. So that's why I thought I'd take the time to actually briefly describe a little bit about what Alita is here. So Alita has its origins with the legal hacker movement. So anybody heard of the legal hacker movement? Right? Started in, especially you, Josh, back. So this is the mindset in which how we can use technology to hack, right, the legal system. The problem of using the word hack in Asia, not so good, right? People like, what are you doing? What are you hacking, right? So through the assistance and actually support of Singapore Academy of Law, Alita was born. Singapore Academy of Law had its split initiative, and we have Naomi here, which is who's now back into the fold in relation to legal tech. So Alita was launched in TechLawFest 2019, right? And so it was meant to be a pan-regional organization that's meant to bring together all the innovators and technologists in the space. So there was a strong push in relation to reports, because it was led by Josh Lee, who's over at the back. Josh, as you may know, is almost in relation to policy making. And so he's very strong in terms of policy and papers, in terms of reports on state of legal innovation. We get various events and the like, but you'll note from the year, it was COVID time. Not a great time for creating community, right? So, and then we did start the Alita Awards back then as well, but as you can see, it was COVID time. So it was different period in terms of community building. So when Josh left to go to Berkeley, both Adeline and I stepped forward as the co-chair. So Adeline was quietly sitting at the back there. She's my co-chair for Alita, based in Malaysia, and I'm based in Hong Kong. And we started expanding the Alita Awards in the last couple of years, and it was fantastic. Great nominations from across the region. I'm so glad to see so many friends from India here, because that's actually where we have the most applicants from. And so we look forward to you joining us in a couple of days' time when we announce this year's finalists. So this year we've recalibrated this into a paid membership model so that we can actually afford a virtual assistant. Is a real life person, not a bot, right? Based in Vietnam. They can help run various things. We're lucky to have gold members like Clifford Chance, Rajan Tan, represented by Michael Lee's the front, right? LexisNexis, as well as silver members, EOS, I understand that's the new acronym, right? And CAM from India, being our silver members to help support the organization. Plus, we're encouraging ordinary members, both on the individual and the organization side. So these are some of the benefits, and part of it is community building. So what have we done in the last couple of months since we relaunched into this space? We had our first India Roundtable in New Delhi, and there was a great community that we're building there. We've got lots of interested parties that are all coming together. In relation to that was hosted by Kaitan. We were down in Singapore for the ACC APAC annual meeting, where I actually ran a workshop on create your first GenAI chatbot in an hour. Right. So again, how do we upskill and get the legal in-houses to enter into the space? We also held our first Singapore gathering during that time, kindly hosted by Rajan Tan. So similar to tonight, we pulled the community together, right? And afterwards comes the drinks and the networking. So that's a very important element of community building. In Hong Kong, I host roundtables. So at the FT Awards that was mentioned by Shanice, the founders of the awards from RSGI were there. So we hosted various roundtables so that they could hear directly those relationships. I ran different roundtables, one for in-house and one for law firms, so that we can have candid discussions. We are supporting organization for initiatives in Europe, for example. So at Future Law, run in Tallinn in Estonia. We also then hosted Ashurst in Hong Kong when their global digital officer was going through around the world, and basically similar to what's happening to the Charles, all Ashurst employees will have access to Harvey. So this is a trend that we're seeing. All the large firms are giving these tools to the lawyers, and the question is, what are they going to do it within what guardrails, the Microsoft? And more recently, I was just up in Shenzhen with LexisNexis, and they were introducing their tool there. It's kind of a sneak peek because Asia doesn't get access to it yet, but stay tuned for they've already launched in the US. So our Alita Award is what's here, and what we're spending a lot of time on. And if you can put your hands together, I think we have many of the finalists here. So if you're finalists here, visiting here for the Elite Awards, could put your hands. And you see signing, we've got 70 finalists here, right? So these are the different categories. So if you attend on Thursday afternoon at 4:15, everybody's invited to see the finalists. Here we are today at Clifford Chance in Singapore. And in fact, I was telling our friends from Korea that in 2 weeks' time, we will have a Korean roundtable hosted by LBox, again, to grow the legal ecosystem there. So as you can see, we are certainly growing and getting more busy. We're lucky to have a great board of advisors with Evelyn and I as the co-chairs of the steering committee. We're looking to recruit more on the steering committee side as well as on the ambassadors. We're stealing the idea from ELTA to actually have ambassadors in the different countries across the region. So if you're interested, do let us know. And last but not least, if you're not already a member, do consider joining us. And in fact, I'll announce it now. So we're having a special Technofest special where we're going to offer 10% off for membership this week. So if you join this week, you get 10% off. There's some people said they wanted to join us. Wait a couple of days. We're going to give this rental. So if you do sign up this week, welcome one and all. Thank you once again to our friends at Clifford Chance for hosting this wonderful event. And thank you in advance to our wonderful panel as well here to share in their wisdom from the very different perspectives. With that, over to you now, please. Thank you very much.
Hi everyone again. So I'm also doubling up as today's moderator for the panel. So as I briefly introduced, I'm Shanice. I lead innovation at Clifford Chance in EPAC. And, it's a very interesting topic because as we gather here today, generative AI is rapidly reshaping the legal landscape across APAC especially. Whether it's from contract drafting to legal research, AI is revolutionizing the way we practice and the way we know law. So we're very lucky today. We have a panel that brings together a very diverse group of stakeholders from industry to academia and government. And they'll be sharing their perspective on the current state of Gen AI adoption and its implications for the legal profession. So as a brief introduction to the panel today, before they delve into their own introductions, in order, we're going to start off with JP Bjart, who is the Chief Global Strategy Officer at Legalon Technologies, who joins us from Tokyo, followed by David McVie, who is the Global Legal Operations Project Manager at HSBC. And then we have Shamik Kundu, who is the Executive Director of the AI Verify Foundation, which is a subsidiary of the IFDA. And last but not least, we have Brian Tang, who you've heard a lot from already. He's the co-chair of ELITA. So to provide a brief idea of how the panel will flow today, we'll first begin with brief introductions of the panelists, the organizations, their relationship with generative AI technology, and then we'll move on to an assessment of the current state or their perspective on how generative AI is being used today. So, the benefits, the challenges. And then after that, we'll take a bit more of a forward-looking start to ask them, what they see foreseeable challenges might be or the foreseeable potential Gen AI might be. And then we'll open it up for 10 minutes of Q&A so forth. So you guys have any burning questions, you can get them ready for that. So without further ado, let's begin by asking each panelist, starting off with JP, to do a brief introduction as well as what their organization's experience with or interest in Gen AI is. So JP, please.
Great. Thank you very much for the intro. So JP Bjart, pleasure to be here tonight with Legalon Technologies. So I get that comment quite often. It's surprising a lot of people to hear of a legal tech coming out of Japan, especially one that is making progress globally. So we are actually a 7-year-old legal technology company founded by 2 corporate lawyers, and that we're basically feeling the pain of reviewing contracts from top to bottom. 2017, it was already clear that AI was going to offer new possibilities, new tools to help address that pain that is very common. And that's how we got started. And we saw great traction in Japan. very early on, we saw needs from our enterprise clients to not only support them for their Japanese contracts, but also for their English language contracts. So take you back 2 years ago, we already had, when we were still very much of a Japan-focused organization, we already had 3,000, mostly corporate, but also firm clients. We were at around 300 employees at the time. Since then, we have launched we now have a second headquarter in San Francisco. We are actually issuing a release tomorrow for it, but we have crossed the 6,000 corporate, mostly corporate, but also firm clients. So great traction in the space, addressing a need, of course, that is common to most lawyers. Nobody goes to law school to review NDAs, and finally, technology is able to help. So Legal On Technology is very much focused on that contract review pane. We describe ourselves as one of the legal content-heavy legal tech providers. So we have large teams of lawyers that help us with our content, so that our AI is grounded on authoritative content. And so working with a growing number of corporates at different sizes, different industries. And what we're really excited about is a growing number of geographies, US, growing number of clients in APAC as well as Europe. So I'll pause there. Should I go into the next step and how we're leveraging generative AI?
I think we'll leave that for the later segment.
Right. Thank you. Just wanted to.
Hi, my name is David Matvey. I work for HSBC Global Legal Operations as a program manager. So that means A, I'm not a lawyer, and B, I've spent my entire career in financial services, tech and operations. And if you're curious about that, what that means is when I'm not being creative, I'm being really, really conscious about cost and efficiency. So that's my perspective on everything, including Gen AI. At HSBC, I'm sure you're aware, I think the first machine learning models were deployed over a decade ago. In global legal, we actually deployed our first virtual assistant over 3 years ago that employs an internal machine learning model for automating interactions internally between our business partners and our lawyers, basically providing our business partners with a self-service option for specific transactional related question and answers or thought processes they need, and then utilizing that within a very targeted space. Currently, I'm the program manager for our global Ask Legal program. So we're actually deploying a digital automated solution for request, workflow, and knowledge management at scale across the globe right now, which is kind of why I was late, Brian. Sorry.
Good excuse.
But thanks everyone for coming today.
Thanks very much. I'm very pleased there's at least one more non-lawyer here. A little bit of a fraud here. So thank you for the opportunity. I have, I guess, 3 different connections to this topic. The most obvious one, I heard myself, I was like, who's here from the government? And then I realized you referred to me. It is my second month in over 25 years of working in the government, nominally. But I work at a place called AI Verify Foundation, which is a subsidiary of the IMDA. The IMDA, for those of you who don't know, is the closest thing to a horizontal AI regulator in Singapore. It is actually the personal data regulator for sure, also provides horizontal AI governance guidelines. AI Verify is an attempt to take that rather dry topic of guidelines and policies and turn it into 2 other things. One is a technical tool to test machine learning models, traditional machine learning models, as well as to evaluate LLM applications. So if you are not tooled up or are looking for some kind of guidance on how to test your models, etc., this is not just, oh, here's guidance. It's actually go and download this open source project and use it. So that's one part. But to be honest, that's a means to an end. The real objective, and also the objective I'm here, is to create an active community. And we use the word community and ecosystem quite a bit, but it is an ecosystem of people who are focused on testing of AI, and eventually actually assurance of AI systems as a third-party requirement itself. So that's kind of my focus. Before this, I was at a startup called Truera, which was in the business of providing commercial software to address AI. And I'm not sure if it was the same room, but I did speak to a whole bunch of Clifford Chance lawyers the day before that internal bot, not the bot, but I think the internal helper was released across APAC in my capacity then. And before that, I was, among other things, CIO for compliance, legal, and a bunch of other functions at Standard Chartered. So my first experience of legal tech / even some kind of machine learning in AI was probably also, in legal, was also probably about a decade ago. But I must say things have moved significantly since then.
Great, thank you. When we were doing the prep call, we had the funny conclusion that I'm currently only a lawyer. And even then I was left. So by way of background, I was trained as a traditional lawyer. I started in Australia in a little firm called Mallesons. And then I moved to New York, a firm called Silton Cromwell. And I got handed to join a little firm, which now it's called Credit Suisse. So I was in practice in big law, and then I was in-house in Hong Kong. And then a few years ago, I left to go to fintech and reg tech and law tech. And for my stints in New York, I actually spent some time in Silicon Valley during the .com boom doing that stuff before it went this way. So I'm quite comfortable. And so what brought me back into the law was when I learned about this thing called Global Legal Hackathon, right? And I said, wow, finally, lawyers doing technology. Who's running in Hong Kong? Nobody was. I said, somebody will underwrite it, I'll organize it. And so Thomson Reuters came forward, and so I organized Hong Kong's first legal hackathon, where I talked to the clients in New York, and they won. And that's when Hong Kong Legal Capital showed and said, hey, listen, we're trying to launch a new initiative. Would you like to lead that? And it sounded like a startup within the law school. So I thought, okay, that sounds a little bit interesting. So that's how I created LightLab. So that's my day job, by the way. So I'm the founding executive director of LightLab, Law, Innovation, Technology, and Entrepreneurship at Hong Kong University. It's interdisciplinary, it's experiential. So part of it, in my mind, is this. Students, and again, it started 2019 before the Gen AI stuff, right? So how can we better prepare our students to enter the workforce that is changing rapidly with technology? And one of my theses is we have students work with actual companies. And so we were lucky in our first cohort, we actually worked with HSBC, because how I knew David, right? And FedEx. These days, we also work, my students and I are working with little companies like McKinsey and MTR. But we also work with law firms. So with the Gen AI prototype tools, the students are working on those prototypes mentioned. It does take, and we'll talk about this, but with Linklaters and with Sherman, would love to work with more. So the idea here is that, and the question was, how would we interact with AI? The students are learning how to use it. And working with proof of concepts with actual users in the marketplace. But actually, importantly, at the universities, we're struggling with this, right? So from a lot of the traditional professors, like, oh my God, like everybody's going to cheat, right? What is this cheat? So some professors are now proposing what I call pen and quill. We're going to go handwritten exams now, okay, guys? Right, so, but is that the right way forward? So these are really active discussions we're having in the different spaces where.
Thanks, Joel, for providing more color on what you do for your day jobs and how it relates to generative AI. So now we'll move on to the very first segment, which is basically doing a bit of an audit or an assessment of your respective perspectives about what the state of Gen AI is. So we'll start off, and this question will address it to David and Robin. How would you describe the current landscape of the use of AI in legal, and how does AI feature in your day-to-day work? So I know, David, you've provided a little bit of color and a little bit of detail, but could you maybe delve into a use case that you feel strongly about?
Yeah, so the use case that we have deployed in production right now for the past 3 years, we actually call it Alfie, and it's a virtual assistant that our business can go to answer questions about a series of very specific transactional items, very specific processes where the answers don't change. They tend to be quite static over time. So it's a process that can be reviewed 6 months to a year. You don't have to worry about it changing. So I think one of the things that was really important to us was to make sure that we were very clear about the process that was fit for purpose. And actually, that was probably the hardest part. Actually, doing the tech was the fun part. But we were able to get a couple of very specific legal processes, legal items into the tool and test it with the lawyers, and the business are now using it to be able to self-service. If they have a question about a particular procedure or a particular bank standard that needs to be fulfilled, they can go to the tool, they can interact with it, and then either get the device they need or the templates that they need in order to do their job properly. We're now taking it to the next level, which is we're executing a digitalization of our entire request and workflow management process, including knowledge management, so that we can integrate and automate not just the request routing to make it faster and better for experience for our business, but also allowing us to interject a whole series of other items such as knowledge management in terms of question and answers and templates and documents, so that the business can interact with us through the tool so that we can focus the lawyers on the advisory work that they need to do and not being template jockeys, which tends to be kind of what people fall into sometimes. So clearing all that space out, automating it, is a journey we're doing right now, and we're doing it across all 55 odd offices that we have legal operations in across the world. So we can talk later about some of the challenges that poses in terms of executing it. But I think, we're going to talk a lot about tech, but it's really important that there's two fundamental questions you need to know the answer to. And if you don't, you better pause and figure out what those, and the first one is, what are the processes that I have that are fit for purpose, and do I understand them? And do I understand the data that those processes generate? And do I monitor that data right now? Do I have a handle on all of that? If the answer is yes, then please proceed to Gen AI. If the answer is no, then I'm very passionate about, you really need to understand the processes, your value chains, and the data that those processes not only need, but also output. And that's really where we're at, is trying to make sure that we get all that right, and then move on to how do we automate that through a technology.
Right?
Great. So David is lucky to work in a kind of large company, like it's doing lots of cool things, and he's at the center of that. So at the university, what can we do? Right. So how we plug it is for me, one of the appeals of being at the university is being the platform that can bring different people together. So there are different levels in which to answer the questions. On the one hand, at the university itself, so some of you may not know, but Hong Kong is part of China, and therefore it ended up being geo-locked by OpenAI. So here in Hong Kong, you cannot get access to OpenAI ChatGPT when it first came out. So when it first came out, a lot of people were freaking out, and Hong Kong, you famously banned it, right? Because from an equity point of view, because for example, we have Shamik here, who's like tech savvy, he can get his VPN, get access to it, and then the other guys are like, oh, how do you get, and he can use it in his tool, and I can't. So that's why they banned it initially. But then when I wrote to the administrators, I need Light Lab, I need to use this. So then they said, no, the administrator, as long as the instructor says it's okay, it's okay. So in fact, since then, what the universities have done is pay a lot of money to Microsoft, right, to host these things within their framework. So I think access became very important. And then how do you upskill the students to be able to use it? And then what guardrails? So that's where the cultural aspects, in terms of what can they use it from an academic integrity point of view, what can't and shouldn't they use it at that point of view. And then now that's generally within the university, and link that to law school, and then link that into the law profession. So I run now 3 roundtables, one for in-houses, one for law firms, and now one for NGOs. Because we started with no-code, low-code tools, right? To us, my thesis was, I'm not here to train the law students to be coders, right? You can be a scientist. There are lots of no-code, low-code platforms to actually use this. I call Gen AI the ultimate no-code, low-code. But so when we started with, but there's a big difference. With no-code, low-code, you can it's deterministic. You can audit it. You know what the decision-making tree is. And if something's wrong, you can take that and you get it right. With Gen AI, we started with lots of POCs for different use cases. It was great for certain things, right? Summarizing, translation, ideation. For the one that most people thought would be the best, which is deep research, right? But then again, the technology is changing and evolving so quickly. So therefore, I think that's where we started working with the project partners in terms of their use cases. So this is my proposition. If you're in a law firm, you're in-house, these are cool tools. You need to spend time working on it. You don't really have time. Hey, you got students. Can you work with students actually? So it becomes a win-win for the parties concerned. And then secondly, with these roundtables, the law firms and the in-houses can candidly, within Chatham House rules, share their pain points, right? Because everybody's struggling. We're all in the same boat. So that's where the committee like Alita comes in as well, where what we're doing, at least for my roundtables in Hong Kong, we can spread it across for the rest of the region and the like. So I think there are very interesting developments. We see big law firms, they will touch on this later on as well, reacting to this, but the small and medium-sized law firms are a little bit different.
Okay, thanks so much, both. Moving on. So what are the key benefits that you've encountered with implementing generative AI? And I'm going to be posing this question to JK Shmik. Interestingly, because Shmik also used to be from a vendor's perspective, from a legal technology solutions perspective. So I'm just going to be posing this question to him. And, are there specific ways in which you quantify it? So maybe from a legal perspective, that's like time savings, cost savings, but maybe you can provide a little bit more color on that.
Absolutely. So internally within Legalon, we obviously leverage it extensively, but I'll answer from a perspective of what we're hearing from our clients, where the benefits are. And there's a couple of interesting figures. So some of our clients, we are Gen AI heavy, but we're also, because we've done this, we started prior to Gen AI being a thing. So for us, it's a combination of different AI technologies, Gen AI being obviously the direction of where things are doing, but still today we get great value in combining different AI technologies, but that results in review times being reduced by up to 85%. So some clients are reporting up to 85% time saving in reviewing certain contract types. But that's a figure. But what we're really hearing from clients is that ability to focus on more higher value work. Again, we come back to the reason why you became a lawyer. And it's that ability to focus on more strategic aspect of the work. That is clearly the benefit. I'll just tie it with the fact that we started in Japan. Japan is a country, as most of you may be well aware, where the bar is extremely difficult, resulting in a very small number of practicing lawyers that all end up with law firms. Very few of them are in the corporate side. And that meant that we had very early on in our history to support teams that were basically made up of mostly paralegals reviewing contracts, and they had to work, obviously. And that experience is now helping us working with other, with APAC-based or US-based enterprise in allowing them to shift from, lawyer-heavy contracting teams to more paralegal-heavy contracting teams overseen by legal leadership. So really focusing on the higher value work has been the biggest item for us.
So my expertise in the legal industry is limited, to say the least. So I'll probably take this answer slightly more broadly and talk about how it's been impacting similar roles. I'd push back on that thing about higher value, not because it can't be done. I do think it should result in that, but like every other new technology, I think at this point, if I'm honest, most people I talk to, past clients, colleagues, now people I talk to with my role, are struggling to just get the efficiency benefits out. And if you are not count yourself, pat yourself at the back because you're doing exceptionally well. At this stage, it is primarily an efficiency game for the vast majority. I'm not challenging that it might not work. And it's a difficult to get efficiency game. I'm going to give you a financial services example, unrelated to legal. I was talking to a Spanish bank that's arguably more advanced than most American banks in adopting AI for a long time, well before generative AI. And he is saying, I really don't like generative AI. I said, what happens? First of all, the board tells me to use this directly with customers because they heard from somebody that this is already ready for it, which is like, I'm going around trying to tell them, don't do it, this will blow up in our face. But secondly, when I do that, it costs me $10 to run per chat, 10 euros to run per chat, and another 6 euros to automatically assess the quality of that chat. Actually, I was much better off having a human being doing it, right? Even in continental Europe. Now, I think that's an entirely anecdotal example, but the point I'm making is the nature of the benefit right now is efficiency. If you're lucky, it can also be effectiveness, particularly through the thing that you referred to, which is a broader theme as well, where generative AI seems to be good for those who are not at the top of their game yet, and actually helps them catch up quite a bit. I think there's this famous HBR study with BCG, but it is actually quite a well observed trend where people who are not as good as the leaders come quite close to the leaders in their profession in a white collar kind of context. So that's where the effectiveness benefits comes. The one about this frees up people to do cooler stuff and generate more revenues, I have not seen it yet. The only people I have seen it generating revenue for are the troublemakers, including the ones that you referred to. But this might change. I wouldn't even say this might change. I think this will change as we get a better handle on the data and on the technology to make it work. But right now, I'm saying I'm sitting with efficiency if you're lucky.
Yeah,
There's something you want to-
just to maybe a very valid point. And again, where we're seeing most value today is on those lower value type of contracts. We're again focused on more the corporate sector, which is more predictable. And again, AI is far from perfection. It's a good first pass, can help you save some time, but we're far from.
I have to say, it is quite late in the evening. I was looking at the room, and so I also intentionally disagreed with you to some extent. I don't think that it's saying that. So hopefully it woke people up. Yeah.
Excellent. That's very, very different of you. So maybe we can zoom out a little and, let's talk about it from a bit more of a macro perspective, especially since we have quite a diverse audience from different parts of APAC here. So given the varying sizes and resources of law firms, as I think I touched on, how does the adoption of generative AI differ between larger and small to medium law firms? And additionally, the second part of the question, are there significant variations in adoption rates across different countries within APAC? So let me direct this question to Brian first, and maybe we can move on to David, because he does the rollout across all the offices in the region.
So in a nutshell, very, right? As we all can feel. So you have the high end, which is the large global firms, right? Who are keen, they've got the resources, they sign up major partnerships, spend a bit of money, right? Spend a bit of money on this, right? And so they're rolling out. And I think that is good because I think when I was trying to think about a response to this particular point, I think they're driven by kind of three elements, right? So one is fear, right? So one is FOMO, and then the other one is just experimentation. But you must be willing and able to have the bandwidth to do the experimentation bit, right? So I think the large firms are trying it out, and that's fantastic because I think they will help lead it. I think what we find, and again, I have some of our colleagues here from Hong Kong as well. So we always look over to Singapore. I was born in Singapore, by the way, so I always I can speak to both. But Singapore's led a lot by the top down. It's fantastic leadership top down. In Hong Kong, it's more bottom up, and so we try to do what we can there. But with the top down, so the law societies of the world, the SELs of the world are trying to look for the SME kind of law firms because most law firms are mom and pops, and a lot of them are not adopting it. One difference with Gen AI though is anyone can go on and just try it out. Whereas previously to do the no-code, low-code, there's a higher bar and all that. So people are trying it out, but it takes time to try it out. And then you're like, okay, how does that connect with my practice? And okay, so maybe I can draft it faster. But here's my provocation when I started this journey, and why I started with working with in-house lawyers. What is the business model for law firms? Charge by the hour. So it's an efficiency model. You get, I take less time to do it. Like, what does that mean? Does that mean I charge less? Well, do I really want to do that? So it becomes a really provocative thing for the larger and others, and now the in-houses who are, by the way, the major clients for the large firms. So think about, hey, how may this change the business model? How may this change? And so I think that's what's happening at the high end. The smaller ones, I think they can try, but it takes a lot of time, and maybe, so as usual, it does take a bit more time. Across the region, same issue we have because of digital divide elements, because of language, right? So say I'm so happy we have representation here in some of our islands from Indonesia, from China, where a lot of the languages are not English, and a lot of these LLMs are English. Some of the translations are really good, but guess what? There are nuances, right? So I ran a training course for Jardines, and there are 80 lawyers across the region. And the interesting thing is the Chinese lawyers were saying, okay, the translation's not bad. The Indonesian lawyers were saying, doesn't cut it, right? So it's not quite there, right? We have our Korean friends as well. That's why they're now creating their own elements in the different models. So I think this is fast evolving and really quite necessary.
David?
Yeah, I would definitely agree with Brian. I suppose from my point of view, the complexity of the question that you asked, especially in Asia, which I think is funny because, like, as we do business, like that term just goes away immediately because I'm like, okay, so it's just like a container term, and then I forget about it because the actual important term is which country am I dealing with, which jurisdiction am I in, and how do they handle not just, let's just take a step back. How do they handle data, number one, today? And how are the regulators in that jurisdiction reacting to Gen AI for real, behind the door in terms of what they're telling you and saying, this is how we would like to deploy in our country. So you've got that aspect. So to some degree, I think that if you're a giant, large law firm that has offices all over Asia Pacific, these different areas, your challenge is going to be to try to deploy something at scale in each of these different regions. Each of these countries is going to have different reactions to what you're trying to do. Some will be more cautious and some will be more innovative. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing so if you don't take that into account, it's going to be game over because at some point that regulator is going to come and say, hey, so how are you handling Gen AI with your data? Because I'm looking at how you handle data anyway. And the second thing I think is exactly what Brian said. It's how law firms actually make money. I mean, as a tech and ops professional, I mean, I come into I remember even the first law firm I went to, I was just amazed at how many books you all just have everywhere. I'm like, this is a lot of paper. And we're 21st century by, a couple years now. So I think, and that's kind of the funny way to put it, but I think the serious argument is exactly what Brian said. It's not that somehow the legal profession isn't innovative enough or they're more conservative or all those. It has to do with the actual economics of how a law firm makes money. So how they can translate that into, and I don't have that problem. We don't have that problem at all as an in-house law firm. We have the opposite, which is driving efficiency. And in that regard, I would agree with my colleague here. The efficiency gains that we've currently seen is marginal. I mean, we have, and that's because a lot of either the regulator says we don't want you doing that here. We still want to deliver things via paper, and we want you to view them that way. So then we have a whole country that's out of scope. Or it's just because we just can't find the scale of it. Obviously, I'm very lucky at HSBC. We have the resources to invest in this and to explore this, which is fantastic for us and for our lawyers. So, we're very excited internally. But I feel like, as you said, the economics of a standalone law firm is really the question that needs to be answered.
But if I can spin that in a more positive way, it becomes a challenge for the law firms. So what struck me, so we have R&T Technologies here, who is now actually monetizing and creating new licensing and other models for legal services. So when I saw what you were saying, it's like, I wonder how they're going to monetize that, right? Are they now going to charge clients, right? Because again, I work in financial institutions, so RegTech, regulatory technology. You can charge clients for an annual subscription fee, right, for that upload. So is that a new? So it's a positive way. It can be a nice provocation if law firms and their partnership are willing to say, well, actually, but I charge $20,000 an hour, and now this is how much per month, right? So again, I think it's a good provocation.
Thanks, so. I feel like, when it comes to all these legal panels or legal roundtables, I think should be quite familiar because this was the exact discussion we had at Eden Hall, the dinner, where it was folks in AI event, and eventually you discussed it kind of trickled down and segued into the billable hour law in the future a bit. But let's do that as a question for another day. So maybe we can kind of segue to the next segment, which is looking forward and potential challenges of generative AI. So I feel like David already touched on, quite a lot about the regulatory aspect and how, there are different privacy laws, for example, or different countries kind of appetite and governance of a lot of this generative AI products. So I think I will direct the next question to Shamik. So there are currently many ongoing developments in AI regulation today. There are multiple approaches to AI regulation that are ever evolving. So first off, what perspectives or insights can you share on the current landscape at EZA? And do you think there are any developments overseas at Singapore? So speaking, because, Singapore is the host of TechLocal this year. Are there any developments overseas that we should continue to watch closely to learn from or even adopt?
Sure. So first, on your first question, how do I see the landscape? There's actually a very good paper by Professor Simon Chesterman from NUS. It's good, not for most people. It's just for if you are a geek trying to study what's happening with AI regulation. His team has gone 8 years and looked at 193 jurisdictions and what they have been talking about on AI governance. So the first thing I would say about AI governance requirements and guidelines is there's a lot of it out there. The second thing I would say is that, to my knowledge, other than one country, there is no other country in the world with an actual regulation around AI that is in force rather than still being in a period of grace. That country, of course, is the People's Republic of China that has had requirements for a while, like legal teeth. So that's the second thing I would say. At the moment, yes, the EU AI law is passed, but it's not yet fully in force. Of course, we'll reach the end of the grace period soon. There are laws in our regulations, legislations in specific states in the US. There are targeted things in, I don't know what happened to the New York HR law. There are aspects of it, but by and large, it is mostly guidelines coming close to, I've heard one person say, regulatory glare, but not yet regulatory stick. Glare is where it stops. So that's the second thing I would say. The third thing I would say is that there is actually a lot of similarity in what all these regulatory guidelines are saying. If I leave out one aspect for a moment, which is the question of foundation models, which come back to in a minute. But if you leave that aside, almost every regulator is saying more or less the same thing, which is you must have transparency to how you build the system. In some cases where it actually impacts individuals, you must have transparency into how that decision came about. You must worry about fairness. You must think about the robustness of the system, fallbacks. This is basically about 9-10 principles from the OECD, etc., which get repeated everywhere. So the third thing I'd leave you with is actually for everything that lawyers, consultants, vendors like ex-vendors like me tell you, there's actually not that much difference between the countries. Now, there is a very significant difference around the topic of foundation models and their treatment. And that comes from particularly the EU AI law, which started a horizontal consideration of foundation models and how to govern them. There's also the related question of how responsible or accountable are the providers of foundation models for the downstream usage or misuse of their models, as well as for the way in which they secured the data to train them. This is one particular area, which is around IP rights on the data that was used to train the model, and on downstream, what's the right word? Downstream, not obligations, whatever is the reverse. Basically, downstream liability for any damage caused by a model. This is one area where there is some significant difference. Otherwise, more or less, the rest of the world is in the same place. We all want these principles. Most of us don't have laws. Now, to your second question on what Singapore can learn, we absolutely can, and we are continuously looking at what we can learn from various jurisdictions. To give you some examples, we have cross-referred our requirements, I now say as the second month in government, with the NIST requirements or AI risk framework. So that brings us in line with the US considerations. We are very much aligned with the EU standard setting body, the CEN-CENELEC. We are talking to multiple ASEAN countries, as well as this thing called, I think it's called DigiForce, which is like countries less than 10 million population. They have all come together on how to approach AI. Singapore, we all know as Singaporean, we can't stand on the back of our own economy or our own population. So absolutely always on the lookout for what others are doing, what can we learn from them, how can we map to them, and hopefully in the process push towards de facto standardization around the world as much as possible.
Thanks, Shaweek. So in the interest of time, we're going to meld the next two questions together. And I'll direct it to JP and David. So what are your recommendations for legal professionals or professionals in general considering adopting generative AI? And you can melt this with talents that you see in recommendation that you have. So maybe we'll start with JP.
Yes, so that's a question we get often, right? How should we approach this? And I'll focus on the corporate side of things because that's where I'm most familiar. And our recommendation is quite simple, is to focus. Focus on what you can do best. We do not recommend, especially to resource-constrained legal teams, in-house teams, to get into heavy prompt engineering. Pick tools that help you and that help you stay focused on what you do best, your layering, your actual contract review. Focus on what AI does best. AI is amazing. We're all super excited, but it's better at certain things today than others. So you probably want to focus on where you can get value, what's been proven. If you have resources to explore, wonderful. But if you want to hedge your bets, you're probably safe to go for something that's been proven. And then focus on what is achievable. So unless you have someone like David within your team that can lead a project and that can ensure that not only once you release something that it works, but that can keep on working as new models come out, as testing is required, just be realistic and go for something that is, that basically put chances on your side. Pick a tool that will allow you to get results quickly. And if you have resources to go a bit deeper, and if you do have someone like David, then it's really interesting. Or if you're a larger firm and have those resources, it's exciting to be exploring. It just be realistic and look at what your resources are within your organization. So focus is the keyword. Yeah.
Yeah, I would completely agree with that. I think the two recommendations that I would have that we learned at HSBC, the first one is be very specific about what you want to accomplish. All right. Gen AI is a world that you can get lost in if you don't know what your direction is and what your goals are. So you need to be very clear about what you're trying to accomplish. Are there any metrics you're trying to drive? If not, that's fine, but you need to be very clear about what that particular technology is driving for you. And that clarity becomes, again, as I said previously, about understanding, how your processes work today, understanding your data. Shameek talked about foundation models, and it's really important to understand the data that goes into the model that you're asking for. I think the biggest recommendation I would have is that if you're approached by a vendor or the company trying to talk to you about, their AI tool, the first question I would ask is, so talk to me about your foundation model and talk to me about your data in a language that I can understand. Because what they'll happen is that they'll pull out their PhD in maths and say, well, this man or woman has created this model, which is super cool, and that has to happen, but they have to explain it to my grandmother. And if they can't, then I question whether they actually quite understand what they're doing. So that's the first thing. The second thing that we've done that I think is really amazing is we're not just, so Gen AI is this new tool that we're all kind of exploring, right? Well, if you're kind of my age, we had a whole bunch of other applications that we also deployed in the past. With each one of those things that we looked at, there was training and literacy involved for your employees and for your lawyers. So you also need to understand and figure out what type of AI literacy do you want to drive in your company if you're going to be using this tool in your company itself. And that means investing in some training, investing in what you want the lawyers to know. I'm real passionate about the fact that we hire lawyers to be lawyers, not technologists. However, they need to understand how the technology works. And if you're me and the lawyer looks like he doesn't, it always fascinates me because they always have this in their hand and they always have this in their hand and they have their phone. And I'm like, you're good. You are perfectly fine. You can do AI literacy perfectly fine if you can manage these two things. And if you use them on cloud, then don't even talk to me. You're going to sign up for an AI. So that's the second recommendation I would have is think about how you want to drive AI literacy in your organization so that everyone understands how it's being used, at least at a foundational level.
So, okay, on to our final question for today before we break for networking drinks. And this question often declines. So, how can we continue to foster collaboration and knowledge sharing in the field of Gen AI in the region? I'm sure you're an expert because you're doing research in this area.
Well, the other way to put it is that I put a lot of my volunteer time. So Alita is just a voluntary organization. The reason why we make a membership base now is so that we can pay for somebody to actually maintain stuff, right? So all the trips, for example, all the events, I actually do research in Gen AI governance. And so whenever I get invited to go speak somewhere, then I say, okay, let's do an Alita event there as well, right? So that's how I was in Delhi, and now we're going to Seoul as well. So it's all on the piggyback of existing stuff. But I think it's a nice segue. We didn't plan this. David talked about literacy, right? And so, and as you've heard here, this area is fast evolving, right? There are people who are more optimistic about where the technology is heading towards and what it can achieve, and maybe they're right. There are people that are more pessimistic and say, well, hang on, because of hallucination, because inconsistency and the like, and especially in the area of the law, where precision is so important, maybe they're right. But at the end of the day, whatever happens, that this is being used as well. So I think the hope and intent is that we have more of these forums of us getting together, more of us from different parts of the equation. So we need the technologists who have the cool tools that are coming through. But to David's point, we need them to be able to explain it to us. And again, we came from finance, so I love the grandmother thing because ultimately, when the regulator, when the MAS, HCMA comes, they say, okay, explain to me, David, how your system works. And if you can't explain it to me, then hang on, wait a minute, right? So that's why they need to ask that question, right? So, but then we have wonderful government and other initiatives like Verify, where we are trying to find solid ways forward. Because ultimately, presumably you're in the role because you believe there's something there, right? There's something there, but we need to put aside the externalities, but only by candidly having a discussion across the spectrum of the ecosystem and also across the region. So we are, again, HSBC, the global bank, right? Same with Alita. We are all here from different countries, but what we know is that it's different in each of your countries, right? So, and so when I go to Korea in a couple of weeks' time, I don't know the local environment, we need to know, but we can share as well. And I think that's where that's the value in terms of doing this. So I think going forward, that's what we're trying to achieve here. And we're also glad that you're here as part of that journey as well. Thank you very much, Shanice and TC, for hosting us this evening.
Thanks, Brian. So on that note, we will now open the floor for questions. So, someone from CC. Yeah, maybe you can just speak out loud.
Sure. Here's a question about technological boundaries, because it's still very unclear what AI can do right now. Whether we compare it to mobile night, the achievement right now is about that skill. Whether it can reach to a skill like, for example, a Steam engine, we don't know. So a question about what your strategy will be if it's going to be a fantastic next generation. For example, GPT-5, it's solved the hallucination and can have a long-term budget from reasoning. It's really good. How your strategy, your adoption will be changed. Or another scenario, it's just like this, a little bit better, but nothing more. It's really interesting to hear your real the technological boundary, your strategy.
Are you directing this question to any specific panelist, or is it open?
It's open to yes.
Well, as the tech company, I'll give you our take. So we're excited about the progress that technology is making. It's difficult to predict what is going to happen when, but we have to be ready. And let's say that without being overconfident, so general models will do a good job for a lot of people, but our focus being on corporate legal teams, there are some specific things that legal teams require that we do not expect OpenAI to be able to address, at least not in the short term. So it's our job to be ahead in other areas. Generative AI is part of the equation. It's not the whole story. So you need tools that support you in many ways. Gen AI is going to be part of it. We need to make sure that we give you tools that include Gen AI in the most innovative ways. And to be honest, although we expect the next generation to be doing a lot more, grounding it in some legal content you can trust, we believe is going to remain a theme for at least a few generations of GPT. That's where we stand right now.
Maybe I'll just give a very brief, it's not a direct answer to your question, but hopefully it helps you understand. Notwithstanding what I said about the current state of adoption and difficulties in getting benefits, I think I read someone's opinion, which I completely agree with, which is that even if there was not a single bit of progress on generative AI going forward from here, the progress that has already been made as it lands, as processes get re-engineered, as frankly, digital native, AI native kids start getting into the workforce, and importantly, as population goes down and the need for people to do more, individuals to do more comes in, that ship of the effect of AI has sailed. So irrespective of how fast it moves, you should start looking at how you're going to make the most out of what is already out there. And it's not just generative AI, it's everything else it's brought. For the first time in anybody's memory, I'm an ex-chief data officer, people are starting to think about data management of documents. Nobody was thinking about this for a long time. Now, whether there is AI or not, the moment you know what is in which document, that alone will help you tremendously, right? So I would say, even if there's not a single drop of progress, we are already very far ahead in terms of, like, we're committed as an industry, as an economy, to making tremendous progress in terms of productivity improvements. Whether it goes like this and what effect it has, don't know. But you have to start preparing anyway for what we already have.
Just to quickly add on that, on the preparing, Gen AI is a lot about experimentation, right? So if you aren't already trying it, you should try it. So then you can make up your own mind, depending which model you are, whether it works for your use case or not, right? And whether, as you said, whether it improves or not, at least then you make up your own mind. So I think especially for lawyers, a lot of them don't try it out themselves. They just need to try. So it's in experimentation. That's a question of fact. Thank you.
So I speak up also. There's a plethora of legal tech options out there, and there's a bit of a hype when it comes to Gen AI because everybody's claiming it's built in. ready to use. I guess a question to you, David. How do you select this ocean of tech tools, the ones that you can click for chance, give it a chance?
Can you briefly introduce yourself, by the way?
Yeah, I was the former chief compliance officer for Bayer Pharmaceuticals. Yeah, I steered the digital transformation over there. I left the company and I founded a digital transformation boutique called Transforming. Yeah, thank you.
That's an excellent question. I would say that it starts off with what the question I asked before, which is, what are you trying to do? So what are your goals? What are you trying to accomplish? Because some of the tools accomplish different things. So the first way you can segregate this is by what the tool's functionality actually is. And you can do that pretty easily with like a spreadsheet or something. You go, all these, what is the actual functionality they're focused on? And a lot of vendors have a specialty as well within that. So then you have to align that with what you want to accomplish. And that's going to help you kind of weed out sort of the direction you want to go with the group of vendors. That'll get it smaller. The other thing that you can do too that is, I think, appropriate is once you get to that point, really, as I said, talk to the vendors, ask them questions about like we just talked about, explain to me exactly how your model works. What exactly are you doing? And if it sounds like they're genuine and honest, then maybe move to the next step. But if they can't answer foundational questions about how their models work, where their data comes from, what their value proposition is, then I'd be very careful. You've got, you also have, you have the small vendors, but you have all the large companies as well. We talked Clifford Chance about Copilot, right? So you also have to think on that. Like, do you want, and there's no right answer. It's just what's right for your company. Do you want to focus on a smaller kind of startup and kind of work with them? Or do you want to go with an established, giant, Microsoft that has Copilot, but that also can integrate with MS Dynamics and a whole bunch of other stuff. And that provides another kind of value proposition. So again, sort of what are your specific goals of your company? And I think that'll help kind of weed it out a bit. And then just go with your gut. When you're sitting there with somebody and you're across the room with that him or her person, like, okay, this is good or not. So, just all that together, that's what I would do.
Lady over here. Hi, I'm Jenny from Deutsche Bank. Data protection officer for Deutsche Bank. I have a question, Shamik, regarding how the AI governance framework is going to work. So what I noticed is that in EU, you have the AI Act, which is binding in nature. There are principles that everyone will expect it to follow. But in Singapore, unlike the PDPA, which is binding, the AI principles are generally frameworks, sort of directives that we can follow. So how do you see this evolving in the long run? Do you think it's going to get sort of integrated with PDP, or do you think the AI governance principles will become stricter? How do you foresee it changing?
So it is my second month in public. I don't think it's appropriate for me to comment at that level, but I think I can. First of all, the person who runs PTPC is Denise Wong, whose team also runs AI policy. So that question is easy to answer. It is run by the same team. Having said that, without knowing what's in the minds of the law and the MDDI ministers, I would find it extremely unlikely that suddenly Singapore will go against its stated policy that it is not mandated at an across-the-board level. In fact, even the EU AI Act, other than that bit on foundation models, it is leaving it to industry regulators. So it is much more likely that industry and/or use cases will decide how far it goes. A cross-cutting law that somehow is kind of mandating, neither Singapore nor most countries in the world or most jurisdictions in the world are currently in that. Now, can that change? Yeah, maybe a catastrophic incident somewhere can change. My personal guess is any kind of enforcement, not just in Singapore, stepping back, is more likely in localized areas like use of AI in war, in weaponry, or in specific, like software as a medical device. That's an area where there are, but those are requirements driven by the respective use cases rather than a generic cross-cutting AI. The only exception to that right now, of course, is the UAI's foundation model consideration.
In the interest of time, I'll take one last question.
So, I think the lady had raised her hand first. Sorry. Please go ahead. You raised this first.
I'm Gracia from Bursa Hukum Indonesia. I have one specific question to Brian. And I'm wondering about the diversity and the accessibility when we talk about the AI literacy, especially in the Asia Pacific region, because you are aware that there are a very diverse culture, barriers, and also different traditions in specific countries in Asia. So can you share what's the progress so far when we talk about, for example, women for low tech and Gen AI in the Asia Pacific, and what kind of barriers, especially the accessibility, let's say we talk about the remote areas or rural areas across Asia Pacific countries, and how Alita has managed that? Thank you.
Thank you so very much for that question. So Alita has reconfigured itself more recently and outreaching actively into the space. So what I would add is a few different things, because you raised some very, very important questions, especially for here in the Asia Pacific region. So number one, just to share with you, very consciously when we changed the membership model, we actually included a global South pricing. So we give an actual big discount because so that we want to be inclusive, right? We want to price it such that everybody can be part of it. We even have an individual and a student pricing. So again, we want people to be part of the equation. So that's number one. Number two, on the women elements. So maybe I almost feel that my co-chair, Adeline, can speak more to that. She leads a lot of women in tech initiatives, in fact, out of Malaysia. And the hope and intent is we expand that across the different regions. So part of it, the challenge is exactly what David said, right? Asia, it's very different, right? Every country is different. So that's why I show those slides. You know, luckily, because of my job, I get invited to different countries to actually, speak. And therefore, then I piggyback an event. So I'm looking for one in Indonesia sometime soon, and then we can do something there, right? But that's part of it. That's how we have Priyanka just sitting behind you from India. So that's how, and I go in there, then I learn the notes. I don't pretend to know the answers, but I need to work with the local champions, right? And say, look, and then that's why we want to engage the local champions, because you can tell us what to do. I didn't want to be personalistic. We're not here to tell you this is the standard, this is the way to do it, right? But we want to encourage, we want to support, we want to share resources, and we want to learn from you. And I think, again, as part of the Global South, there are lots of commonalities across the board, but there are differences too, as you say. And so I don't want to assume where that's concerned. So I think I'd love to have that discussion further with you, because that's exactly what we want to do as part of Alita. It's very nice and easy for us to have great discussions in Hong Kong, in Singapore, in Australia, where all the developing countries and we're very pleased to have JP here, because I joke with him when I first said, is that our first legal tech unicorn? He says, well, not yet. Right? But we want to encourage that, right? Because I feel that the solutions, we have fantastic solutions coming from the West, but a lot of solutions we need to be tailored, not just for the local circumstances, but the local pricing. Right, and in India, it's famously cheap, right? But they have there's a great resource there, and they're creating great tools. So if we can create legal tech in Asia that can support the pricing for Asia, wouldn't that be great? Right, so that's I'd love to continue that discussion with you and others who are interested from the different parts of Asia too, because it's a very nuanced, very important point. And we very much believe and want to work on that issue, but by the same token, not be paternalist and say this is the right way to do it, right, guys? We want to hear from you. What do you think is the best way in Indonesia, right? And in Korea, in Philippines, in Vietnam, in Cambodia, very different countries, right? Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. So I think on that note, thanks so much to all panelists. Could we give them a round of applause, please?
Yeah.